All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the Tuesday, December 11th Committee of the Whole 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting in order. To order, it's approximately 5:33 p.m. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Burgess. Here. Councilwoman Bailey. Here. Councilman Ross.
Here.
Councilwoman Faircloth. Here. Vice Mayor Shelley.
Here.
Mayor Porter.
Here. Any additions, deletions, deferrals, Mr. Manager?
No.
None. First item of business, tab 1, is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion? Moved. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Tab 2, Mr. Manager.
Mayor, the City of Homestead receives a community development block grant allocation each year from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. At the end of each grant cycle, the city is required to prepare the consolidated annual performance and evaluation report and make it available to the community for public comment. Staff recommends Mayor and Council authorize City Manager to submit the fiscal year 2017-18 consolidated annual performance and evaluation report, known as the CAPER, to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development as presented.
Any questions from council on tab 2? Ms. Fairclough?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As it relates to the funding for the senior programming, I understand that there were some issues that prevented them from operating over the summer, correct? So for the new fiscal, well, the upcoming fiscal year, what is the timeline for that? Because $41,000 wasn't even enough for the summer.
We currently, in the current year, we have $112,000 set aside for the public services for elderly services. And the goal was to try to reach out to them late December or to early January to see if they can get their program started at Michael Williams, the same group that we had awarded it to before in the summer, but it was just too late for them to get it started then.
Okay. My next question is, I was reading this, and I know you have different goals that you have to, well, not have to meet, because it says that even though you don't meet the goals, it's not tied to any funding or anything like that. It's just based on community input. But my question is, why have the goals then, if there's really no sense of urgency to meet them? I don't understand that.
Hi, is this on?
Yes, it is. You're on.
I'm Calvin Knowles with Knowles and Associates, your CDBG consultant. Right, well, it's a planning document and it's a living document. So 6 years ago when we set out to start this, those were the goals that were decided at the time through meetings with community groups and nonprofit groups and with local officials. And since that time, you know, priorities change, and I'd say the biggest priority that's changed is the funding of some city projects that took resources away from other projects. So, you know, the consolidated planning process, you just completed another one this year. It's a fluid process, and it is goals, and I mean, HUD wants you to try to meet those goals, but if you don't, there's, like I said, there's no penalty for it. It's your goals. But you know, there's no law that says you have to meet the goals that you lay out when you start your 5-year planning process. So,
No, I understand that, but
yeah.
You're going to set the goals. I think we should work judiciously to be able to achieve those goals. My next question is, in here, you reference that we didn't meet our goals set out in the consolidated plan, but there was no rationale why.
Okay.
So there were 3 less public service projects and 1 less public facility project. So essentially we didn't meet our goal, but there was no rationale why. Is there a reason why we didn't meet the goal?
Well, because of the timing of some of these projects, we actually did achieve, especially on the public services, we did achieve a number of additional public facilities that were, for whatever reason, were not completed administratively in time to report. So, you know, what I would suggest is next year we revisit that and and reevaluate those goals, and state that we did in fact achieve some of them. I mean, because administratively, like, for example, we had like the YMCA flooring project. That actually
Yeah,
was
that's-
technically completed, but we didn't get the reimbursements information in time to report it this year. So as far as not including a rationale, I mean, we can certainly go back and add some text about why specifically things weren't completed.
For me, I would like that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. If there was a barrier, I would like to know why that barrier was there or why we didn't meet the goal. And finally, for the homes that were sold, the 10
Yes.
units,
Yes.
how much did they sell for and where did the money go?
I'm sorry, how much did they sell for and what?
And where did the money go?
Okay, well, I don't know, let me see. Just going to the NSP now. Okay, I can get you the information on how much they sold for. I don't know off the top of my head. And where that money went is it's actually program income, and it went into the city's coffers where it remains, because we are still in the process of trying to get the NSP program closed out. So there's about, off the top of my head, I think you've got about $400,000 in program income that was generated from these houses. And the intent is to use that money, the intent, as I understand it right now, is to use that money to complete the rehabilitation of some houses we got back from Galata and to sell those houses to low-income people. Because you have about you have exactly 5 houses that are vacant right now. They're city-owned.
Okay. Just finally, just a comment. Carlos, you and your team, I think you're really moving the ball forward with the community development block grant. And if you notice, my questions are less and less every time we present this. When I first got up here, I wasn't comfortable with the direction that it was going. Now we have more funds, where we're allocating more funds to public service, which is very important to me, these nonprofits that are here. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And Calvin, thank you as well, because we've had our moments. But thank you for doing a great job. Really appreciate it.
Any other questions from council, tab 2? Any comments from the public on tab 2? You're welcome to come forward. Seeing none, close the public hearing portion. Is there a motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Tab 3. Yes, sir, Mr. Burgess.
Tab 6, so these ladies that work so hard all day and
Want to go to
at
6?
SOS and
Anybody
could
opposed
maybe
going
go
to
home.
6?
instead of sitting here for another 30
Do this.
minutes.
Okay, let's go to tab 6 then.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor, at the September 26, 2008 council meeting, Mayor and council approved the submittal of a 2018 JAG grant application, which has been approved and awarded to the city of Homestead by the Department of Justice for $62,590. This funding will support law enforcement crime reduction initiatives and has been allocated to the following budgetary line items: overtime, $44,000, FICA, $3,366, travel training, $2,300, equipment, $10,644, supplies, $2,280. The grant does not require any matching funds. Staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution and authorize city manager to enter an agreement with the Department of Justice and establish a budget for the 2018 JAG grant award of $62,590.
Any questions from council? Any comments from the public? You're welcome to speak. Close the public comment section. Anything else? Is there a motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sandy.
Now go home, don't waste it. Yeah, you got to go home now.
Tab 3, Mr. Manager.
It'll never happen again.
Tab 3.
Mayor, Homestead Public Services Energy Department is required by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to follow certain standards associated with cybersecurity as it relates to critical electrical infrastructure. The regulatory standards are complex and dynamic and require a tremendous level of expertise to interpret and implement correctly. HPS Energy wishes to partner with Navigant Consulting to leverage their expertise in the upcoming transition to Critical Infrastructure Protection Plan version 6, which includes but is not limited to the 2018-19 self-certifications, as well as the preparation for the 2020 FERC audit. Navigant has a team of industry experts who can provide Homestead with the necessary assessments, processes, suggested tools needed for the transition, and for any subsequent audits. Navigant has been working with HPS Energy for the past 2 years and is familiar with all HPS Energy and FERC systems, policies, procedures, and requirements. Staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Navigant Consulting for critical electrical infrastructure cybersecurity for a 2-year term in the amount not to exceed $200,000.
Any questions from council? Any comments from the public? Any public here? No. Close the public portion. Any final questions from council? Is there a motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Tab 4.
Parks and Recreation Department requires one vehicle for the Parks and Fields Specialist who performs mostly field work and the other for the FICA Williams Community Center staff. Staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing city manager to purchase 2 2019 Ford F-150 pickup trucks for a total of $62,692. This is part of CIP project number 914.
Any questions from council? Purchase 2 trucks. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, close the public portion. Is there a motion? Moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Tab 5.
Mayor, staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to purchase an Alltech AT40G bucket truck in the amount of $112,784. Facilities Maintenance Division requires this new bucket truck for maintenance work around the city, which includes the installation of sports netting, parking lot, and walking paths, lights, as well as pressure cleaning. Purchase will be made in accordance with National Joint Power Alliance contract number 012418 ALT from RFP 012418, public and utility equipment with related accessories and supplies.
Questions from council? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, is there a motion? Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Tab 6, we did. Tab 7.
Yeah, this is an item we brought back. There were some questions. In December 1999, the city Clear Channel Outdoor entered into an agreement for construction and installation of 9 bus shelters within city limits for the purposes of advertising. Though the original agreement expired in 2009, the city and Clear Channel Outdoor have continued to operate under the original agreement on a year-to-year basis. Both parties wish to enter into a new agreement. Terms of compensation, city shall receive annual compensation in the sum of $700 per shelter with advertising. Every year thereafter, the annual fee per shelter shall be increased at the rate of the Consumer Price Index as calculated by the city's finance director. Staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing city manager to enter into an agreement with Clear Channel Outdoor for the provision of the maintenance of bus shelters. Al is here. We did have some questions. Al, if you could address those. The original.
Right. Originally, there was a question in reference to where the $700 were standard for the industry. We went ahead and researched Miami-Dade County, City of Miami Gardens, Homestead, and Doral, and Hialeah. And actually, I have a chart here that I could make copies if you would like, but Miami-Dade County gets no revenue, is really the only one that they have 1,000 benches, shelters. We only have 9. City of Miami Gardens gets $833 per shelter, but they have to maintain them. Whereas we're going to be getting $700 per shelter, and the advertising company maintains them for us. City of Doral gets 497, which is substantially less than us, and they still have to maintain them themselves. And the City of Hialeah gets a small 2%, maximum of $3,000 a year, whereas we're getting $6,300 a year for the 9 shelters. So actually, we're probably the better deal of all the ones that we've researched.
All right.
And the other question that I believe came up was whether any advertising was going to be done for any inappropriate matter. And in the agreement and under maintenance and ownership of shelters in number 1A, it clearly states the company shall not permit advertising of alcohol, tobacco, adult entertainment, massage parlors, adult bookstores, adult theaters, adult escort services, pornographic or obscene material. The determination of such objectionable material shall be determined by the city and shall be removed upon a written request by the city. So it's very clear on the agreement.
Okay, very good. Any questions from council? Any comments from the public? Is there a motion on tab 7? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. One nay? Motion carries with one nay. Vice Mayor. Tab 8.
Mayor, staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Hazen and Sawyer for professional engineering services pursuant to RFQ 201307, professional architectural and engineering services for a lump sum not to exceed $106,700 pursuant to Section 24-4227 of the Miami-Dade County Code revision effective March 14, 2014. All utility-owned or operated sanitary sewer collection systems must participate in a countywide regional computerized collection and transmission system model. Through this agreement, Hazen Sawyer will assist the city in updating its wastewater collection and transmission system model, which is due April 1st, 2019.
Questions from council? Comments from the public? Because we have to do it, right? What do? We have to do it. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Tab 9.
Here, the City of Homestead is volume sewer customer of the Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer Department. Per Miami-Dade County Code, the city is required to follow a series of mandated regulations related to the rehabilitation and maintenance of its wastewater collection and transmission system. This work includes CCTV tape inspection log review, point repair oversight, CIP liner inspection, office engineering and management. Staff recommends Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing city manager to enter into an agreement with Hazen and Sawyer for professional engineering services pursuant to RFQ 201307, professional architectural and engineering services for a lump sum not to exceed $124,667.
Questions from council? Comments from the public? Any final comments from council? Is there a motion? Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Tab 10.
Mayor, this is an emergency purchase notification to council as required by Homestead's Code of Ordinances, Section 2413, emergency purchases. It's following a vehicular collision with HPS Energy Infrastructure. The city experienced the breakdown of a critical electrical infrastructure switchgear located at and feeding into the Homestead Hospital. This piece of equipment prevents the hospital from experiencing a power outage should their main circuit fail. 2 vendors were contacted for quotes with regard to this highly specialized piece of equipment. Due to the nature of the emergency and possible negative impact to the community, City Manager's Office under Section 2-413 authorized the immediate purchase of the switchgear through Powell Electrical Systems, the lowest cost vendor, for $101,628.
This has already been done. You just basically need a verbal okay from the council
Yeah.
that you're okay. Any problems with the manager doing what he's already done?
Thank you.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Tab 10.
This one here,
I mean,
tab
11,
11,
I'm sorry.
planning or a lawyer, or James, who's taking this one? Michelle, you're on.
You're on.
Good evening. At the October 17, 2018 City Council meeting, the City Council directed staff to present City Code Section 3047D2 changes to administrative site plan for discussion. In your packets, you will find a staff memo and the applicable provisions attached. I can go through each section of the code if you would like, or we can open up the discussion.
How much time do you want to spend on this, council? You missed the last one. You were mad, John, we didn't take it up last time you flew in for the meeting, so. Would you like to be recognized? No? Okay. You going to go through it line by line? No, we don't need to do that. Everybody's read it.
There's only 5 provisions of what constitutes a minor deviation in a previously approved site plan. If you'd like, I can
That'd be fine.
go
That'd be-
through them very
yeah.
quickly. So the code allows for major deviations and minor deviations. Anything above a 5% deviation of the previously approved site plan constitutes as a substantial change or a major deviation. And so the code stipulates in City Code Section 3047D2 that minor changes may be approved by the Director of Development Services upon determining that the proposed revisions will not alter the basic design, will not violate minimum code requirements, nor any specified conditions imposed as part of the original approvals. Minor changes shall include the following: change in building size up to 5% of the total floor area, relocation of buildings or other structures by no more than 10 feet, replacement of plant materials specified in the landscape plan with comparable materials of an equal or comparable size, provided that the changes reflected an upgrading to the original plan approved, changes in floor plans which do not alter the character of the use or require an increase in parking requirements, and finally, engineering revisions such as drainage, water, and sewer of a technical nature that do not impact any other aspects of the approved plans. So if changes in a site plan fall into these 5 criteria, we can review them administratively. If not, then they're presented to the council throughout. We go through the whole public hearing process, the Development Review Committee, Planning and Zoning Board, and then ultimately to the City Council.
Okay, questions, Mr. Burgess?
Just real quick. And the applicant's allowed one time, like they can't come in and keep changing things over and over and expanding and expanding and expanding where the whole project would change?
The code doesn't give a threshold as to how many changes they can make. They can make multiple applications if they so choose to.
Okay, because, I mean, I foresee, possibly somebody could come in and see this loophole and keep jumping and jumping and jumping, and then the whole thing has changed from what we originally anticipated the project to be. Just a thought that I had.
So what you're suggesting is somebody comes in and they get a 5% deviation or a set aside, then they come back in and ask for another 5%.
And then
come
keep
back,
coming
another
back and back
5%.
and back.
There's got to be some
There's got to be some kind of
process.
stop
There's gotta
where
be
they're
something.
allowed
Yeah,
a
I agree with
maximum
you.
of. Go ahead, James, any thoughts?
Anybody?
Michelle, anybody?
Could review situations like that on a case-by-case basis. I've been with the city about 6 years, and we haven't had an applicant try to do what you noted on the record.
I'm just looking, I know how some people, will try things, so just a thought that I had. I'm fine moving forward as long as, at some point, the department realizes they can't continue to have one person keep changing and changing. Should we put something, a line in there real quick, James?
I mean, you could. I don't think it's necessary. I think that development services would look at it, its totality. I mean, if you had an applicant who came in a subsequently short time frame to apply for another 5%, then I think you would be in a situation where someone's trying to violate the intent and the spirit of the ordinance. And in that case, we'd go beyond the parameters of this and we kick it into a full review for you all.
I'm coming, okay.
All right. Anything else, sir?
Sir.
Vice Mayor? No? Oh, well, you're up. You're up.
So this is how the code currently sits, correct? And I think this was brought up under I think there was the daycare that came in recently before us, and that's what kind of brought this to all of our attention, is that it seemed, and I know here that's kind of philosophically, how much power do we as a body want to give to staff? I think that's really kind of where the discussion lies, is that, do we make the decision up here at the dais, which obviously costs the applicant potentially more money because there's a hearing process, there's notification processes, et cetera, it slows the process down, or do we want to allow staff some additional leeway or discretion to make some of these decisions on our behalf potentially? And so in this particular case, I mean, these are very small changes. I mean, almost too small. I mean, 5%, 10 feet. I mean, it seems like that's too much, not giving you guys enough discretion. I mean, I don't know what that threshold is. I don't know. I mean, what do other codes look like in other cities? What type of thresholds are they considered to be a change?
So most codes have the staff review the director and make that determination if it's a substantial change or a minor change. In all cases, if the modifications meet the intent of the originally approved plan, then staff is permitted to go ahead and conduct that review. Cutler Bay doesn't have a set standard. It depends on what the change is. Palmetto Bay uses their requirements and administrative variances, and they have a 10% threshold. The Doral leaves it up to the staff with certain criteria, so long as they're not increasing density or substantially changing the intent of the originally approved plan, they'll allow staff to go ahead and conduct an administrative review. The city of Miami, the same. The zoning administrator makes that call. We also looked at the county. At the county level, most site plans are reviewed and approved administratively. If you have a master plan or a project of great scale, like the American Dream Mall, then that will go to the Board of County Commissioners. But for the most part, those site plans are reviewed in-house by staff.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, this is, to me is too restrictive. I don't know what that threshold is, because ultimately you're talking about, I mean, typically small changes. I mean, the use is already there, the function's already there for the most part. It's just a matter of, is the square footage increasing? Is it a bigger building? They're adding a new building, that may or may not change much in the way of the function or the effect in the community or the neighborhood. So I don't know what that threshold is. I mean, I think there maybe be some threshold. I don't know if I want to completely just open up and say, hey, you guys make the decision, or whether is there a process in place or any other cities or counties where there's some sort of a notification requirement to council where you guys administratively make the decision, but there's some sort of, they send notification to the council, and unless a council person pulls it, so to speak, or flags it, or is there's never a process? And I don't think for this, but I'm just asking in general, because I know we've had this discussion in bigger picture stuff. What should staff be allowed to do versus council? So kind of as we're talking about it now, I just figured I'd ask, is that something that exists in any other format?
Well, not in our code. I mean,
not in our code, but in other codes.
I mean, we're dealing with two different things here. So we're dealing with a site plan that's already been approved,
right,
and we're dealing with modifications to a site plan. But then you also have brand new things that are coming in, and then there's a separate threshold with respect to what constitutes a full-blown site plan, whether something can be reviewed administratively or whether it requires planning and zoning board recommendation for you all as well. And so that's not what's before you. What's before you is just the simple, if a site plan's already been approved, someone wants to make modifications to it, where's the line in the sand? What's the threshold? And so, I mean, we can certainly look at the other and bring that for your discussion, but that's not what.
I understand. I went way beyond what kind of we are here. This is more of a simple issue. I get that. And so I'm not as concerned about the discretion that I say hand over, the power the council hands over to staff on this one, because I think that you'd have to make a pretty substantial deviation in order to really change the feel of what already is sitting there. But I asked the question more so because I think this council has had that conversation, though, at times, or has hinted at that conversation about bigger picture items related to development services and making the process more streamlined. So I just wanted to somewhat ask the question while I had it open to see, is that something that other counties or cities have done, where there's a process that allows it to be expedited, where staff has the ability to make that decision, but there's a small window in time there where the council could interject and say, you know what, I want this to come before us. And if they don't, then it's smooth sailing. And if it does, then it allows the council to still weigh in. So just something I was asking just while we're having the topic. And then
I'm not familiar with a process like that anywhere.
I have not seen that at other cities that we work in or have worked in. from an application standpoint, I find that it's beneficial for the applicant if we lay out the process in advance during a pre-application meeting, so they understand, okay, these are going to be our costs, this is our timeline. If we accept the application and then change the process in the middle of a review, I think that changes their plan for development, it changes their costs, it changes their schedule significantly. And so
No, I think we can have that bigger discussion later, so I'll yield the floor at this point. I've had a chance to ask my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Roth.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, a lot of good points, but there's a lot more detail, I think, in this that comes up later. I think we brought this up because of the challenges that daycare did have, and a 5% increase in the square footage. And Michelle, if you can give me the numbers that he went from to. Do you have that? Because I don't remember it either.
I think it was over 50%. It might have been like 53% or 55%. His original site was very small. And when you take a small facility like his, that 5% deviation calculation is not a large number. And so he does get pushed into the public hearing process because we can't distinguish between a facility of his size and a shopping center, for example.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that's why the discussion is here, is because we want to make the process easier. And if somebody's already got an existing building, and you say site plan, and most people think the site plan is being altered, this is a building that's already in place for the most part. It's already been there for 10, 15, 20 years. This would be a different conversation if a developer came in and was building 150 homes on a piece of property and then changed the site plan to put 200 homes on it. This isn't, my thought process is this is simply somebody who's already have an existing property. They're doing business and they're doing well, and they need to expand their property to accommodate additional business. And a 5% threshold on a building that's, let's say, 5,000 square feet would only add, what is the number, 250 square feet to that building, and they have to come to us and go through a 6-month process. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid here. I'm not sure if we're looking for a recommendation to increase the percentage, as Vice Mayor said, how much of the authority do we want to give to development services? And I believe in giving development services flexibility to help us streamline the process. But what is the number? Is it 25%? Is it 30%? I don't know what that number is either. I mean, I'm comfortable with 25% increase and let them have the flexibility as long as everything else conforms to what that site is set up for. Now, when you talked about the interior modifications, that changes the whole conversation, because they're not adding to the square footage, but they're reconfiguring the inside, which could create parking problems or change their scale of parking based on what the code says they need to have. So, I mean, that's a totally different conversation, I think, because we're not changing the site plan at all. We're just changing the interior of the building. Is that right?
No, they can change the site plan up to 10%. So that may be square footage, that may be configuration of buildings. Do they want to move the building more than 10 feet? Are they moving the buildings, are there 5 out parcels and they're moving buildings between out parcels? Yes, you're correct. Increasing the square footage in a building would trigger different parking requirements, different pervious and impervious requirements. That's all dictated by Chapter 30. And so we look at all of these different technical requirements in addition to just the 5% rule, the square footage.
Right. But in the example of an existing shopping center space, and it was this business at one point, they've closed, they've moved on, and a new tenant is leasing that space, and they go to reconfigure the interior of that space. They're not modifying the exterior, they're not adding anything to it, but what they do inside could change the parking requirements because of configuration. If they're housing more people, or is it simply based on a square footage?
Building envelope, if they're increasing the building envelope by more than 5%, that's the square footage that we're talking about in that 5% rule. Are they adding an addition to the building? Are they adding a floor? Which I don't think they would be able to do structurally.
Right.
But that's what we're looking at in this 5% deviation rule.
So that's all we're talking about here. Because I thought I heard you mention something, the interior floor plans. Or is that,
Yeah, there are 5 criteria
Yeah.
that,
Oh, yeah,
That-
changes in floor plans which do not alter the character of the use or require an increase in parking requirements.
right. So that's where I was kind of confused, because this talks about expanding the building square footage or reconfiguring the interior without expanding the square footage of the building. Is that right?
right, so you could have the daycare facility that would have turned into a fast food store. That would change the character of the use.
Mhm.
That would increase the parking. That would be something that would kick this out of the minor category into the major category.
Right, right. So there's so many details to all of this. It makes it confusing even for us to figure it out, let alone an applicant who's going to come to the city to apply to go through that process. So this may not be the end of the conversation, but in order to make it a little bit more simpler, I think there does have to be some flexibility given to the development services part, so that when somebody begins the process and they figure out that 4 months down the road, they're not even halfway done, then they start calling, us and saying, hey, I didn't realize I had to go through this whole process just to add 500 square feet to my building. If we give development service some flexibility, it'll help that whole process. So I don't know where we go from here as far as either recommendations to some of these changes, giving them a little flexibility so that they can help streamline the process for people who come into the city that want to expand businesses, people that are already here that are successful and need to expand their businesses, and then look at some of the issues that may arrive from them expanding. Because I would assume that if a 35-year-old building, a 30-year-old building wants to add square footage, they're real close to their 40-year inspection too, and that's going to change everything for them.
And that's building code. We're not even talking about
Yeah,
that
see?
here.
That's like passing the buck to the other departments. But it's a very complicated thing to go through, and if there is some way that we can figure out to help streamline some of this stuff, so a gentleman who's got a daycare, and I'm only using his as an example because he was here recently, doesn't have to go through that whole process, and it costs them $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 more than they thought, and it leaves a bad taste in their mouth that, if I would have known this, I wouldn't have done this kind of thing. I just don't simply know if we can get to that answer tonight. But I do want to see, and I'm glad it's here, that we're talking about it. This is just one of many issues that have come up that we need to begin to kind of streamline this process. And I'm going to yield for now and listen if anybody else has any comments, because I just feel really that we have to give development services some flexibility in some of this to just help the process along. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Well, I think that's where we're trying to go. And starting with this is look, it can be as simple as some of the other cities. You have hand the whole thing over to the administration to deal with it. Now, obviously, in the past, previous councils maybe did not have as much trust for their development services team as maybe we do now. And maybe in the future, it may be different as well. So I think the goal from my perspective is certainly to streamline the process and give the appropriate tools to development services to move these small efforts forward with, they have enough conversation and communication with us individually to have a sense of who wants to see what and what they want to have come out of this. So, this is not going to fix it all, but I think this is this is what you're asking for from us, right? You want this latitude now, right?
We were directed to bring this item forward for the council discussion, and so that's what
Okay,
we're
but
doing.
these are your numbers.
Mayor, if I could interrupt, though, I just want to make it clear, we're not asking for anything, because this is a real shift in policy, so one thing I don't want to leave the impression with is we're asking for this, because
Okay.
we really aren't. And the thing about this is whenever elected bodies discuss this and make these decisions, normally when it shifts, the pendulum shifts back, is because something was done administratively and then it got built and somebody didn't like it, and then the finger pointing starts. And so I just want to caution you all that whatever you do here, if the staff is empowered to do it, once they do it, and you'll know it when you don't like it, you'll know it when you see it. So
Right.
that's the downside to that.
Right. So when we talk about these numbers, everybody seems to feel like these are minor numbers. This is a minor change percentage-wise and minor in the overall scheme of things. That's the way I'm hearing it. And then there's a conversation about we need to go farther. And I just think we just need to be careful about going farther unless we haven't even started with this, minor change. Mr.
And what
Burgess?
you decide to do, you decide. I just want to make it clear that we weren't asking for this.
Understood. Okay. Mr. Burgess?
Thank you, Mayor. Most of this council has had the pleasure of working with some professionals up here in our planning and zoning and our department. Unfortunately, I had some that weren't so much. And if we had given them the ability to do as they please, we would have had a lot of bad projects probably passed forward to us. So I just want to put that caution out there. It's, you could get some people that can do some really damaging projects or things that you don't agree with if you give everything away over there in that department. And like I said, fortunately, we've got some professionals that stick to the code and do as they're instructed to by the code and what's asked of them from council. But I tell you, in the past, with this code in place, we had development services people that went and did whatever they wanted to administratively, and we paid the price for some of that with some of the projects that showed up out of nowhere in the city. So I think we've got to really be careful as to baby steps are a good thing, I think, and we see where we go to. If there's any steps at all taken. A question for staff is, these changes here would not have done anything. We'd have had to have drastic numbers to get that gentleman his project done without any type of council action. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yes, his site plan modification was over 50%.
Right. I mean, he was doing, he may want to call it small or whatever, but that's a significant change to what his footprint was out there. And I believe that staff did the right thing there by bringing that to us. Now, of course, to build, it costs money. To do things properly, it costs money. And we've got to make sure that what's being put out there is projects and products that people that are in charge, the policymakers, agree with. And if we get somebody that's sitting in that office back there in 4 years, Joe Cordino retires and Michelle says, I've had enough of Homestead or whomever, and we get some people like I've had in the past, it's a free-for-all back there. And unfortunately, I don't want to see that. So I think baby steps are better than big steps at this particular time, especially if we're going to try to change policy or the way the policy is made. Thank you. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Just clarification, but what's in front of us is the existing code, right?
I'm sorry?
What's in front of us now, this is the existing code. These aren't changes
Sir.
to our code. This is what the code currently reads and how it currently reads.
Correct.
Okay, because that's what I wanted to make sure I was clear about. This isn't, and so the debate tonight or the discussion tonight is, do we like the fact that the code is currently fairly restrictive as it relates to discretion for staff, or do we want to increase that to some percentage greater than 5% or 10 feet, for relocation of buildings or not? I'm okay with that because, again, I think these are pretty small numbers. I mean, I would be comfortable with 25% or something, but I think ultimately what we're finding is what was the total square footage of that daycare approximately?
I apologize, I did not bring that staff memo with me. Probably 3,000 square feet.
Yeah, I thought it was
4,000
like, I
square
mean, because
feet.
I've driven by, it's like, almost like a house-sized building. I mean, it wasn't very large, it was pretty small in nature. So I think ultimately applying a percentage, because that's what you're saying, is that even the small change that he was making to a small building ultimately ended up percentage-wise as a large number and 53% change. But it was still overall a fairly small square footage change. So I think that for me, as I'm looking at the discretion here and how to make this work, what I would want to do is make it easier for the small businesses, the mom and pop businesses, the local businesses. And so in order to help that particular business that would be considered small mom and pop, I would almost have to give you guys full discretion in order to make that work and actually streamline it for those particular style building. When you're talking about strip malls or large shopping retail centers, then if you talk about 25% change, you could be talking about a pretty significant modification, which I don't know that I want to necessarily allow to happen either without some sort of say or input on that change. So I think for me, if we're going to make changes, if we're going to open it up, I think it would almost have to be to make sense, to make it even be worth doing. Maybe for the small, below a certain square footage, maybe you guys have the full discretion, it's administratively approved, because those are, again, the small mom and pop, the local businesses, the lawyers, the accountants, the whatever type of spaces we might be talking about, daycares. But then when you get over a certain square footage, now you're in a different realm of developer, and it also has a bigger impact based on that percentage because the scale of the projects that may be modified. Then I think I would want to maintain some sort of level of control. But again, I don't know if it's worth even bifurcating. So that's what I would throw out, I guess, for discussion for the council would be, if we're trying to help the small businesses, you're almost going to have to give discretion back over to staff. Otherwise, I don't know that we're accomplishing a whole lot, because we raise it to 25%, and that daycare still gets caught in the same web. He still has to come through all of the processes and procedures that he went through, and in which case we didn't really help a lot. And then the large scale change could actually be a large scale that we wanted to see. So I don't know that we win either way. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Roth?
Thank you. When someone makes an application for a site plan change, how long does it take for the process to go through the whole thing?
It depends on the scale of the development, the plans that are received, the quality of work that is in those plans, and if the designers of the plans have taken the time to go through the code to meet the minimum requirements of what a site plan is. Typically, if we receive a good set of plans and the applicant is working with us daily and we have a positive flow and conversation, it could take 5-6 months.
And I think that's what we're trying to avoid, is the small business person who's just trying to expand their business to go through that whole process. Now, I understand that things changed throughout the time that they were in those properties, and they may have done some things to it. They may also stall it once they get to that point. But the 6 months, to me, for somebody who's trying to increase their building by 25% in square footage, is a long time. And I could understand the frustration. So, and I understand what Councilman Burgess is saying too, but I think you also mentioned this code was in place and still stuff was going on that the council wasn't aware of. Is that right? At some point?
Well, things were done administratively, unfortunately, because, with this code in place. But, if we open the door up, my fear is that, and when you get somebody who's taking advantage of the situation over there or doing favors or whatever it is, that you have no recourse back. We were able to stop some things because of the code and do that and pull back, rein in some of the administrative things. Some of them got through without us being able to do it. But we had recourse because we did have the code in place too. And it was easier to stop the projects.
Yeah, and see, I like it's almost like a check and balance type situation where you get one board that has to come to this board, and it keeps everything kind of transparent and honest too. They're not doing things that we wouldn't have normally approved of, and then we drive down the street and where did this building come from all of a sudden, you know? So I still think there's got to be some flexibility given to development services. You know, we're here today. Future councils and future staffs and future administrations can decide what they want is best for their city at that moment in time. And I just think that we've been beat up enough that it's hard to do business in this city, and this is one step that might help us to become a little bit more business friendly. I have the utmost respect for development service because they do what they're supposed to do. And most people don't understand that. When you go out to open a business, it's not like you can just sign a lease, get keys to a door, and begin to, do your business. There are all kinds of regulations and with DERM and all these different things that if you didn't do your homework and you get caught up in the green tape, so to speak, that's when they get frustrated. That's when they call us. Why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to do all these things? And we have to be somewhat empathetic to them so that we hold their hand and say, listen, if you call our development services, they'll help you through this process. They're not the enemy in this case. But we still have to be able to show people, and don't get me wrong, they may say that we're not business friendly. I see a lot of stuff going up in this city. I see a lot of buildings going up in this city. I see a lot of people wanting to come to the city to do business with us. So when I've had these conversations with folks, a lot of times it's just a communication issue. They didn't understand, it wasn't communicated to them properly. And once they really get a hold of what they're supposed to do, things go smoothly for them. But it's still a timing thing. It's still, why does it take so much time? And that's what I think we need to work on. Getting the hearings done faster, getting them through P&Z if they have to go through P&Z first, getting the plans and stuff looked at, the questions answered when they come in the first time. Because most of the time when they bring a site plan to you, you have to send them back with a response or questions, right? And then that's when the floodgate opens up on, what? I got to put a water fountain in because of Miami-Dade County? What are you talking about? But go ahead, you can respond. I think you wanted to respond to something.
Yes, when plans are submitted and we start looking at them, if they come in incomplete, we give them back to the developer. We'd like to receive a complete package. In the case that you just described, you need a water fountain because DERM requires it. That's a building code issue. There are rules that we have to follow. We don't write them, we just enforce them.
And I get that. And that's sometimes very frustrating that there's so many different agencies who have control over what happens inside the city. When it comes to fire department, it comes to, DERM and the county and that kind of stuff. So, I'm gonna tell a real quick story. I had someone call me several months ago and said their contractor was blaming their delays on the city. I said, that's very interesting. Let me find out what's going on. Turned out, as we've heard, the contractor wasn't doing what they were supposed to do with the city. So that's sometimes how the word gets out there. And then you hear it from other people. But, we're all here to take care of the people that come into our city, to take care of customers. We're a city. And we have many, many customers out there. And if we don't try to solve some of the problems we hear about on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then we're not really doing our jobs either. But I think that development services, they do the job with the tools that they have within the guidelines that we give them. And I commend them for that because it wasn't like that before, where anything can happen in the city, anything was happening in the city. somebody could just walk in and say, hey, I want this taken care of, and it was done. And that's not the way it happens here anymore in the city. And I'm proud of that, because that's not the way we do things. And I'm proud of that department. So somehow, some way, somewhere, eventually we're going to come up with something that's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be more efficient, so that when people do come into the city, or people that are already here want to expand, they'll feel like they made the right decision in investing their time and their business in the city. And that's all for now, Mayor.
All right, sir. Question, Michelle, if, is there any idea what the timing process would be on, say, like in Doral, if somebody had a project that was similar to Homestead, how much quicker do they get through the process in Doral without having council, planning and zoning, all the others? Is there kind of like, will you be able to frame that so we would be sitting there saying, okay, if there was if we gave up 100%, we would save 6 months, 2 months? You have any ideas? And you may not.
I have not had the pleasure of working with Durrell's planning department, so I can't answer that specifically for that city. But if it's administrative, I would imagine 2-3 months, depending on again, the scale of the project really dictates the timing.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about all these projects as though they all fall into one basket, because they really don't. But I'm just saying, from a point of view of, if you had, as an administrative organization, a little more freedom, or 100% freedom in this case, you would save, on a 5-month process, you would save how many months? 2 months? 3 months?
I can tell you in the city, if we only did the development review process, that's the technical staff review, the consultants review it, and the department heads, we would probably get through it in 2.5 months. Review a set of plans, issue comments, receive revisions, review those revisions, and if all comments have been complied with, then we could go ahead and approve that site plan administratively.
If you don't have that, how long would that same process take place?
We've had site plans that have made it through in 4 months, and we've had site plans that have been stuck for 3 years, which is, again, applicant driven.
But again, I'm just saying, in a cookie cutter model, you're only saving maybe a month or two.
You're also saving costs.
Cost. Well, time is money. So yes, absolutely. Okay, that answers my question. So,
Mayor?
Mr. Manager?
I was wondering if it would be helpful, if you plan to revisit this item, would it be helpful for us to try to survey some cities on the question of what constitutes a change that triggers a change reviewed by the elected body? If you're trying to figure out whether you want to go beyond what's currently here or not. If you're resolved that you're going to leave it this way, that's fine too. But I would say if you think you're going to end up changing it to something else, you might want to get some benchmarks on what other communities do.
Well, it would be helpful. Obviously, you need to have some frame of reference, because we all, I think, hear that it is sometimes time-consuming and expensive doing business in the city because of all these processes. So I think we're all trying to look at what can we do to maybe make these processes go a little faster on behalf of these applicants, these smaller applicants. And as Mr. Burgess said, we certainly don't want to see everything just go haywire, because it has done that in the past.
Because I think there's two competing issues here. One is the question of, geez, how long does an application take? Some people don't understand. The public listening might not understand that variance, but this would be a good example. Is an applicant submits a plan and it doesn't meet the open space requirement. So the staff will say, okay, we've reviewed your plans and you don't meet there's not enough open space on your plan. Go back and fix it and have it comply. Well, if the applicant doesn't come back till 6 months later because their architects really had to rework the whole thing and they had to bring it through their committees and the owner and all that, if they take 6 months or a year, somebody will ask, how long did that application take? Well, you have to factor in that time, which has nothing to do with the mayor and council, the planning board, or the city staff. On the other hand, it's real in terms of if now instead of it being 5%, it's 7%, and now it's got to go through 4 months of process just because, well, if you're at 5% and most other cities are at 10 or 15, well, maybe that's room for you to think about changing it. On the other hand, if everybody's at 5, it could be that they've all learned the lessons of the past, and/or they don't want to allow staff to be making policy, because at some point you go from technical analysis to policy. And what that swing is, I'm less comfortable, with staff going too far in the policy direction, because generally on planning development, at some point, somebody's going to be upset when they see something get built, and better that 7 eyes look at it in public and there's a process involved so that nobody's surprised.
So what you'll do is you'll bring us back some
Yeah,
comparables.
if you're thinking about changing this, I would suggest if you're having difficulty figuring out what's a good swing, then I think some benchmarks from other communities might be helpful.
I think we're thinking about changing it. I mean, obviously, that's why the discussion came up, I'm assuming. But I think much like Mr. Burgess and I think all of the rest of us, we just want to make sure that we do something that's reasonable, but not giving away the farm at the same time. So let's see what else other communities are doing.
Okay, be happy
Mr.
to.
White, okay?
Sorry?
Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Raw?
While we're on that one, another one that came up is a change of use. And I'll give you an example. You're in a strip center, 1,200 square feet, whatever it is, and there was a doctor in that spot. It's in a shopping center. The doctor leaves, and the next person that wants to lease that space wants to do a craft store, doll shop, whatever it is, retail. Can you tell me, Michelle, what the process is? Because you can't operate a retail store where a doctor's office was.
So the change of use process is cited under the building code. And I wish the building official was here because she's better equipped to answer this question. But what happens is if you have a doctor's office and you're then changing to a retail space, that changes use in water consumption and sewer consumption and occupancy rates. And so you have to go through the change of use process to analyze all of the other changes that one simple use is going to trigger. And so the process is dictated by the Florida Building Code, and it's mandated by Miami-Dade County Code. We don't have the ability to opt out of the change of use process as a local government.
Okay. Does everyone understand what that means? Because just a simple change, and that process would take how long?
Again, dictated by the applicant.
Okay,
It could take 3 months. It could take 2 years. If
They
the
don't-
applicant isn't working with the staff, if the contractor isn't working with the staff, if they're not calling in their inspections, if they're not submitting their revisions, they get held up because we really need that back and forth dialogue.
So we're at the mercy of something else. That's a Florida Building Code.
We are mandated by the Florida Building Code, and the county requires it as well.
So when somebody, as I was describing earlier today, is enthusiastic, they find a space, they sign a lease, they come to the city for a business license, they think they're opening the doors the next day, and it could be 6 months down the road before they get a business open because of a change of use. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that's what frustrates me, is that a simple 1,200 square foot space in a strip center has an accountant in there. And then the next user is a retail space. It's going to take them 4, 5, 6 months before they can even start doing business in the city. And I don't understand. You say they got to calculate sewer, so you go from an accountant that's one guy to a shop owner who's one guy. He's going to use more water or less water. He's going to use more sanitation, he's going to use more electricity, whatever. And 6 months down the road, he's out of business because he can't even afford to go through that process.
Well, where it sometimes gets ugly is it went from that one use that you mentioned to a laundromat where they're constantly using water, or a restaurant use where there's no grease traps, there's no exhaust hoods, there's no.
I get
So
that.
some of that stuff gets really complicated, and that's why the county likes to see what's going on. So it sees how the new use changes the impacts to the infrastructure. And,
Right, but
and
the only examples that have come to me that we've had some problems are the strip centers, where they had in one case it was a workforce type, administrative type thing, and then the retail was coming in right behind it. And 6 months down the road, they still can't get open. And I get it that some of it is the entrepreneur's fault for not checking these things out prior to signing a lease, because he's trapped at that point and financially obligated to pay the lease off. And maybe there's no answer to that either. I just think it's very frustrating when somebody tries to open a business and they get stonewalled with, I'm sorry, you have to give us blueprints, you got to give us plans, you got to give us surveys, and you're only opening a 1,200 square foot shop in the city. It just is overwhelming to somebody that, you know, just had a dream of being a shop owner, you know, so I guess there's no discussion on that because we don't have no control over that because it's a building code issue. Right,
we always feel people's pain when they go through that. Unfortunately, we're required to follow those regulations, and that's what we do. And
but who enforces it? Who, if somebody was to go from a doctor's office to a retail space, who's going to come down and see what's in that store? Who enforces it? Does anybody come down?
Yes.
I mean, it's going to happen when you go to the business license part. I get that.
Yes. Also, annually, there's a fire inspection conducted by Miami-Dade County. Oftentimes, in changes of use, there are renovations that go with those changes of use. So applicants have to still abide by applying for a building permit to make those renovations. At times, they're creating more office space or less office space. They're changing outlets and electricity and plumbing. And so we look at all of those technical requirements.
fire department is typically the first line of defense where anything is a public health safety, so that they can count on. But a restaurant, for example, there'll be the health department. Depends on what the use is. If there's liquor being served, if there's some sort of thing across the street with the battery, they have nuclear, what do they call it? It's radioactive material. What are they calling it? Radioactive material. So just to move to another split space, they have to have state review and be decommissioned by some agent, Department of the Health. And so each business depends on what it is, and that's the primary reason why there's so many different points of inspection, because the various regulatory agencies are trying to figure out whether they have jurisdiction, and whatever health or safety issue they're trying to protect the public from, they want oversight over. I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you.
Listen. I love the spirit of entrepreneurs, and for all those that go out there and start a new business in today's climate and environment, it's really a challenge and taxing, I would think, on their souls, because and I hear about the county too, the same thing. The county's impossible to do stuff, and I guess it's all a matter of an opinion of who you're working with and how good the contractors you are and the architects you're working with and those things to tell you what's really going on too. So it's a tough subject.
Also, the frustration comes when because of the change of use, they're required to spend money to retrofit the space to meet the requirements of the new use, and that is definitely time and money, and it becomes an aggravation And some of the things that they're required to put in there, they don't really see or understand. And we face this all the time, unfortunately. Most of the time, thank God, it's not our fault. It's just something. And once in a while, we don't get it right, and we try the best we can to fix it.
I know you do, and I appreciate that. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Sir, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just real quick, I echo your frustration. I went through the same thing with a couple of people that complained, and I convened. I think Kate helped me and Joe helped me, and we had them all in the same room and building services, and came to the same conclusion, which is there's nothing we can do about it locally per se. It's a Florida Building Code issue, and as George mentioned, what really happens is the change of use then triggers the inspection, which then triggers, certain things not up to code or up to specs, and then it's a snowball, and it costs our. So it is frustrating because I hear it from them, and it is frustrating. But I will say one thing Building Services has done is that they have, I think if you still have it, they have office hours essentially where those that are going through change of use can actually go and they will handhold you through the entire process. So one of the ways the city tried to be more friendly to help make the pain a little bit less was to actually walk people through this process almost as if they were tutoring them to make sure that they didn't drop the ball, they didn't miss anything, that they understood the complexities of it, which I think has been very helpful for those that I know of that have been helped by the city. It has expedited the process and allowed them to get through it faster. So it's something at least the city has done to help as best we can, but I'm with you. I'm still frustrated with it. I don't like it anymore. So thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, if it's any consolation, sometimes the city, when we try to do something, we also get stuck with that stuff as well. So when we were applying for federal funds for the parking garage, we were told if we accepted the funds, before we could get approval for a parking garage, we had to submit an application and check with the Mikosuke tribe to make sure that they were okay, that the parking garage had no negative impacts on the tribe. So you'd be surprised how much regulation there is, and it goes from here all the way to Washington, D.C., and we as a city from time to time have had issues with the fire department and with the Durham, and it's just, unfortunately, there's a lot of regulation out there, and some of it is good, and maybe some of it's not as good, but we have to follow with whatever is on the books.
Because you're going to bring us back some info on this, and we're going to have another
So
discussion.
so that at least if you have some guide, you don't have to use it, but at least you'll have something to see what the other cities do on changes to
That'd be
the
great.
site plan.
That'd be great. Thank you, sir. So let's go to another real easy one, number 12. James?
Yeah, so number 12 is a proposed ordinance for your consideration. At the October 9th COW meeting, the City Council discussed amending the city code to provide for alternate members to the Planning and Zoning Board. Right now, we don't have that as a backup, so if something happens and we're short people, we were having a problem making quorum. So this would help ensure that we would never be in a situation where we wouldn't have a quorum met by having these alternates come on board. And so what this ordinance does is it basically creates 2 alternate positions for the P&Z, and those alternate positions kick in when there's a qualifying event on the P&Z board, i.e. one of the members can't vote because of a conflict, one of the members is not present, then those alternate members would then sit in the seat of that Planning and Zoning Board and fill that position. And if the alternates are primary and secondary, so the primary would sit first, and then if there's a second qualifying event or an issue with another P&Z board member, then the secondary alternate would then fill that spot. They attend every meeting that you all had, I think, had requested that they be part of, be present for the meetings. So the requirement is that they be present for the meetings, and that they're able to participate in the conversation, but they can't vote unless, of course, they take the seat of one of the P&Z board members. So this is what that ordinance does. It basically goes through the section of the code that deals with the Planning and Zoning Board. It cleans up some language and inserts alternate in certain places. But this essentially provides that modification that you all had requested.
The appointment process would be the same. The mayor's seat would appoint and ratified
Yes.
by the council. So everything stays the same. These would just be alternate positions.
Right, correct.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't here for the first discussion of this, so I don't mean to make us stay here any longer. But I mean, ultimately, I think the issue here with this P&Z is just finding quality members that are going to sit and show up and want to be there. Because one of the problems I see here is we've named alternate members, which is great, but then we also require these alternate members to attend all board meetings. We can't get 7 people to attend a board meeting, much less getting 9 people to now attend a board meeting to comply with the code. So, I know there's a problem here. I'm not exactly sure the best solution. I mean, ultimately, if my colleagues want to move forward with this, I'll go forward with them. I'll go with the majority, but I just don't know that this solves the problem. I think we're still in the same place, which is finding better quality board members who care and want to show up and take their job seriously. So that's all I have to say about it for now. And I'll see if there's any more discussion.
Well, the truth is that we can't get people to apply. The truth is the ones that do apply sometimes have conflicts and we can't accept them unless they've resigned from other boards. The active people is a small group of active people that would serve on all these boards if they could, but there's conflicts and they're not allowed to. So, as long as, I agree. I think that if we had 7 committed people to planning and zoning, we wouldn't have this problem. And we went through a spell where, for whatever reason, we couldn't get anybody here. Now they're better. The last few meetings we're still one short. I still have 1 position to fill. And the one person that
potentially one more.
I'm sorry?
And potentially one more.
Another night, another discussion.
Okay. Well, that's going to be your problem. It's going to be your problem. So.
I'll put it on my business for next Wednesday.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Burgess. Were you through, Mr. Shelley?
Yeah, for now,
Okay.
I may speak back.
The only comment that I would have is, I don't think we should, if they're an alternate and the board is full of the regulars, I don't think that they should be required to sit in. Unless they, it's their option, but I don't think it should be a requirement. And that's all.
I think it creates another bureaucracy that I don't think we had a problem. It's kind of like, are we closing the door after the horses got out of the barn? I don't know. Are we overreacting to a situation we may not have again? I think from my perspective, if you got 7 people on the dais here, you got staff members out there that know half the chief, everybody in this town. We need to encourage and go find, some quality people that are willing to give a little bit back. And, the older folks are tired. They don't want to, how many more times are you going to get Bobby Shiver to come up here and sit? How many more planning and zoning board meetings is he going to be able to go to? And we've got to start really kind of engaging the younger kids. I don't say kids, but the youth in the community. But like, I'll do what you guys make the decision. But I'm of the opinion it's worked in the past for years and years and years with 7. The problem has only consisted of lately where most of the boards we have trouble getting people on all boards. I can't get anybody to serve on the TPO boards, but I don't blame them because they have to go to Miami. It's up to you. If you guys want to do it, I think we can do it. It doesn't really require that much staff time. It's just basically 2 more emails or 2 more sets of documents, correct? But you got plans, so there's going to be additional costs there for running those plans and having those standbys. Mr. Roth?
A couple things about the recruitment. James, is there a requirement for recruiting the potential P&Z board members? Do they have to meet certain criteria?
Yes.
We thought about that, and we, the makeup and the composition of the P&Z board is so many board members are to be residents of the city of Homestead, so many board members are to be non-residents, so many board members are to be business owners, and because we're in a situation where we are having trouble meeting that initial composition and makeup of the board, we decided that it probably would be best if we were heading down this path of choosing alternates and secondaries that, alternates, one being the primary, one being the secondary, not to put limitations on or conditions on those two positions?
Well, they should definitely be at least residents or business owners in the city. Is that right? I mean, we don't want people coming from the outside making decisions
Yeah.
about what we do in here,
So, I mean-
obviously. And then, is there a requirement of each board member up, council member up here, board member up here, to bring recruits or recommendations to the mayor?
Anything can be submitted to the clerk. It's not a requirement. It's just, we have a position, we have positions that are open on all these boards. All of those recommendations can go to the clerk, and then she can disseminate those out. I think this is a requirement of the mayor's office to appoint. James, correct? Well, most of the boards are requirement of the
Right.
I
mayor's
think all of
office.
them are.
All of them are.
With the consent of council?
Right, but the
I mean-
appointment has to come through the mayor's office and then goes to, so the choke point is obviously the
Usually in the
mayor's
past, if anyone's had a name or someone who was interested, I think they've circulated it to the mayor,
office. Most
through
of
the mayors.
Right, most of the people that chair committees, if they have a recommendation for appointment, it goes to the clerk sends it to the mayor's office, then the mayor's office comes back and asks the council through that process as to who. The problem has been, the pipe is empty on the planning and zoning board. Mr. Burgess brought one forward, but he's on the board, he sits on the CDD board, so he can't do both. You know, he has to get off of one or the other. So he's a qualified candidate, but he's conflicted out for the CDD board, by the CDD board. So I think amongst the 7 of us up here, you know, our issue is to go out and find those people. I think we got to go out and find those people. And in the planning and zoning board, it's not required, but it's recommended that you have somebody from the legal background, somebody from a building background, somebody from a planning, you know, that has a little bit of a skill set that brings something to the table. We just need a warm body at this point, you know? I mean, we're past all that skill set stuff. We're looking for a warm body. So,
We advertise, market, or anything like that for potential people? I mean, because there may be people out there that don't realize that those vacancies exist, whether it be through our PIO or, I mean, the clerk can always put something out there, but it doesn't mean that they're seeing it, you know?
we're advertising, to my knowledge, Madam Clerk, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you advertise these positions and these board openings. Most of the success has come from the elected official finding that person that they want to sit on that board for them, for their particular committee. Where we're having the logjam basically is, and it's a little more complicated with the planning and zoning board because there's reams of paper that you have to go through and kind of have
a lot of work.
some understanding of. So, but Madam Clerk, you do advertise, correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we put it on the city's website and also on the bulletin boards in the, by the cashier's office.
Maybe an option would be to maybe get Zach or the PIO to throw it out there as well through some other means to expand, broaden the search, because not everybody goes to the website looking for these positions. So, but anyway, Mr. Roth,
I'm good with that. And it's like you said, it's getting harder and harder to find people with the, you know, extra time to spend. And, you know, it's actually quite an honor to serve on the boards in the city. You know, the SWAC has done tremendous things for our community. The Education Committee, Councilwoman Fairclough's committee does outstanding work in the community. And those people take a tremendous amount of pride in what they do out there, as well as the SWAC does too. So the CRB board is very active in planning things too. So it's truly, if anybody's listening out there, contact the clerk's office. There's a simple application you can fill out and get active, get involved with the community, get involved with the government, you know, be a part of what we're doing here. It's very special what we do here at the City of Homestead. And, you know, you should feel proud and honored to be able to serve on one of the boards that we have here in the city. That's all, Mayor.
Sure. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I think just something was raised, I mean, as far as the restrictions to be on the P and Z board, and I think that's been some of the issues we've run into, is that, I think going back when I was on P and Z, there was the suggestions that you have the different, criteria as far as professions go, what professionals you wanted to serve on the board, but ultimately there was no other restrictions. It didn't matter if you lived in the city, you lived outside the city.
Correct.
And so it was a lot easier to fill the seats back then because you had people who were interested, but didn't meet didn't meet the requirements you have now. I mean, they're pretty strict now. I mean, in order to be on the board, you can't just move into the city. You got to be here for a whole year. You have to, only 2 can be from non-residents, but those have to own a business that are located within the city, and that city has to continuously have been operated in the city for at least 3 years prior to the voting member's appointment to the board. So you're talking now, we're trying to get fresh blood engaged in our community, and you have some pretty lengthy requirements where these people have to have been engaged in our community for quite a period of time, which makes a lot of sense when you've got people that are making decisions and help making decisions about your community. But I think as we've started to ramp up the limitations and the restrictions on who is qualified to be a board member, you have also significantly shrunk the pool of people who actually will serve. And that's what we're running into now, is an inability to find people that can meet these requirements. And so that's something I think we should consider also moving forward. Should we loosen those restrictions to some extent to make it easier to find new, fresh faces who are interested in, I mean, when I moved into the city, I probably would not have qualified to be on P&Z. I don't know if I would have been here a year before I had been appointed as a city resident, but I was a fresh face that wanted to get involved and wanted to get involved in my community. And so I think that's part of what we're looking for. And some of the restrictions that are currently in existence make that a difficult thing to have happen. So.
And I'll agree 1,000% because, some of the, most active people in this community are not all of them residents. I mean, let's take the Garzas, for example. They're not residents, but they're extremely active and participating in almost everything that we do, but yet they would be precluded from, serving on a lot of these boards. And I'm not picking them out. That's a name we could recognize, So, and I agree, it's a swinging pendulum, and it always tends to overcorrect. So, Mr. Burgess?
No, just to go back to the Vice Mayor's about non-residents and stuff, and I think I was on the council when we changed this, and we got beat up severely for having people that didn't live that didn't live in the city making decisions for the city. So I think that needs to stay as a requirement, because you get people that, although they are involved in the city and all that, sometimes they don't, they're not in the city wholeheartedly, even though they're here and involved in nightly events and things like that. They're making decisions, I think, that we got beat up for, because we had 2 or 3 people at one time that weren't citizens. I think that might have been during your tenure, some of those people were there, and so that's why we came to this. I mean, maybe the 3-year process on a business owner could be lightened up a little bit, but still, I think, you've got to have some vested interest in the city to make sure that people are making hopefully a sound decision that's in best interest of all the residents and the guidance for this board as it moves forward. So that's all.
Okay, what's the position on the alternates right now? If what would be council's position right now if you were asked to do this, put this ordinance in place? Who's in favor and who's not in favor? That's what we need to get to tonight. And then the rest of this discussion we can carry on. But right now, what we've got in front of us is these 2 alternative members being added to the ordinance. Is there a motion to add this to the ordinance? Is there a second to add this to the ordinance? Moved and seconded. Okay, any final discussion? Mr. Roth?
Well, no, I was going to say some other stuff about, I forgot what I was going to say, actually.
Well, let's get
You
this.
threw me off by this.
I'm sorry. Let's get this.
No, here's what I was going to say. As Councilman Burgess said, the restrictions on business owners, you made the point that the Garzas couldn't sit on that P&Z board. They actually could, because they are business owners in the city. And that's part of our code, right? They could, if they're business owners in the city, they have an interest, right? Then they can sit on that board.
Yes, although it's not specified, but we can make clear that the alternate board members are either a resident or a business owner of the city.
No, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. The current requirements are resident of the city and a business owner in the city. Is that right?
If you look at the proposed ordinance on, it's section 3, under section 2-173, where it talks about membership, it stipulates that supermajority of the voting members of the Planning and Zoning Board shall be residents of the city who have resided within the city for at least 1 year prior to appointment on the board. And then the remaining up to two board members are non-residents of the city who own a business located within the city, and they have to have continuously operated and owned that business for 3 years.
So, okay, that's clear. I understand that. So, yeah, well, Mayor, thank you.
It's a totally advisory board, remember? It's an advisory board. There's no binding anything that the P&Z does. It's a local planning agency we're required to have, but they bind us for nothing. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Two noes. So we're going to add this to whatever the next is. 2 noes, Vice Mayor and myself. James, what do we do here? This will come back.
And so I'll make some minor modifications, and then it'll proceed to P&Z, and then to first and second reading City Council.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Just to kind of piggyback on something Councilman Burgess had stated earlier, and that is, I think one of the issues, again, is going to be potentially requiring these alternative members to also attend all the meetings. So I think in order for the process to work, potentially, would be that discussion at the next meeting, whether or not the alternatives are just filling in when the others can't show up, or whether they're going to be required to attend every single meeting. So that, I think, changes some of the dynamics.
Yeah, and I think out of a courtesy as a planning and zoning board member, if you're not going to be able to make a meeting, you should be able to know prior to an hour before the meeting time. Obviously there's going to be an extenuating circumstance, but if you've got 7 members showing up constantly or 5 members showing up constantly, these standby, people shouldn't have to be required to do everything, but I'm a no vote anyway, so. Anything else, Mr. Manager, Mr. Attorney?
I'd like to just request one quick executive session in the case of Hannah v. City of Homestead, case number 2016 CA 33028-01 in the 11th Judicial Circuit for Miami-Dade County. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved and second, all in favor? Motion carries. Good night, everyone. Thank you.